In the next few minutes, I would like to discuss, of all things, fertility and holidays. Okay. First, though, before we get into that, I'd encourage people to check out my writings on related subjects at my website at michaelcross.net. If you're on Twitter, please follow me at PsychoMike777. And of course, all of my shows, well, most of them, are recorded and then put onto YouTube. And you can find that at my website at Michael Cross. Now, you're probably thinking, fertility in the holidays, what's that? You know, you got a little spare time, maybe you make a baby or something. Okay. Well, actually, it's not too far from the truth. You know, if you really think about it, if you look at the origins of our holiday seasons, let's take a look at a few of them. In Europe, they have like around May Day. Of course, in many people associate May Day with communists, but ultimately May Day or Midsummer in some countries was a time that you welcome the spring. And what you wanted was, you know, the sun was out, it was bright, and, you know, maybe the testosterone levels of people was up because the more sunlight you get, the higher your testosterone levels and all those other good aspects of human physiology. And you wanted your crops to be fertile, your animals to bear young, and, you know, your wives to have babies and so forth. And this was very strongly associated with fertility. If you look at many of the aspects of the maypoles from Scandinavia, but also other parts of Europe, you'll find, oh wow, there's some very phallic. Anyway, you know, obviously it didn't take Sigmund Freud to be able to figure those things out if you look at them. But ancient cultures, I will say this, they didn't see sex and sexuality in the way that our modern media does. It wasn't some big porn thing or something like that. There was a very strong respect for fertility and sexuality because this was to enable you to continue the family line, to make babies. That was seen as a good thing, which is something our society has gone away from, which I will get to in just a moment. If we look at other holidays, Christmas, this was a period when people celebrated the ending of, you know, the lengthening of days and the welcoming of the eventual return of spring. The Catholic Church, of course, kind of took it and made it something totally different because, you know, Jesus was not born on December 25th, okay? He was not born on December 25th. But there was all kinds of pagan holidays and fests that were taking place in Northern Europe and Rome and so forth, and they wanted to supplant them. You know, people could still party on the 25th, but there would be a celebration of Jesus rather than a celebration of fertility and maybe a connection to the pagan gods. But like I've said before, you know, the whole thing with sacrificing a ham in the Nordic areas, that was to give honor to Freya, the goddess of fertility. And it still stays with a Christmas ham, which is the ultimate irony of all because Jesus never ate pork. But then, of course, you've got St. Valentine's Day, which has nothing to do with a saint. It has to do with the Feast of Lipicerna, which was a big fertility festival in Rome. You've got some societies in Europe that have they set bonfires during the spring around the changing of the seasons from spring to from winter to spring. A lot of times they just named the holidays after some Catholic saint or something instead of, following the traditions. You can see if you look up on YouTube, the Beltane, you'll see how it was celebrated in the old days. And it was a fertility ritual. But now a lot of people look at these ancient cultures and they think, oh my gosh, these pagan cultures doing all kinds of naughty things. And that's so primitive. But you know what? They had a higher respect for fertility than we do today. In fact, I would say they had a more mature attitude towards fertility than we do today. You see, sex and sexuality, if we take a look at our modern world, We teach our kids that the absolute worst horrible thing that could happen if they have sex is that they could either catch a really horrible venereal disease or they might get pregnant. And we think to ourselves, well, this is just to protect them so they don't go out there and mess around and wind up pregnant or with a disease. But then we think they'll all of a sudden have a very positive attitude towards sex, sexuality, and having babies when they get to be adults. I personally think there's a hidden agenda there. I really do. I really think that part of the drive for the sex education, as we know it, I have no problem with teaching about sex. No problem whatsoever. In fact, I think much of American society you could deal with a much deeper aspect of sex and sexuality than would be allowed in kindergarten through K-12. Now, I don't think that you should teach kids sex and sexuality in kindergarten. I'm just talking, the K through 12 system. But if they're in like late middle school or high school, there's ways you can present it that would be life affirming, not, oh my gosh, you get pregnant, which I think is actually part of it is to get people not to want to have kids. And if you get them young, it's just like if you teach a young person that their body is shameful and horrible and, they should cover it up and everything. And then you expect them to be really, really, open towards sexuality when they get married. Of course you don't think that. A lot of problems in marital relationships are based on false teachings that are given when someone is younger. However, the same is true of sexuality when it comes to the way it's taught, the way that the media just makes it more pornographic, okay, than anything that is something that is to be revered. Our ancestors looked at these things as, again, spiritual. I think to a certain degree that could have been twisted by the Catholic Church, who kind of they made it to where they honored the whole idea of having babies and having kids and stuff like that, but the whole sex and original sin and all that kind of stuff and that there was where you were saying, oh, the sexuality part, ooh. But in our society we say, oh, the sexuality part, great. The kid part, ooh. And that's very unhealthy. In fact, I think to a large degree, it's the reason why we have such a low birth rate in the West. We have an open society, but it's not a mature society. We have a view of sexuality that is consumeristic, plastic, that is something that's more entertainment. In fact, the whole aspect of porn, I was talking to someone the other day about this. I don't necessarily think there's a lot of stuff I've heard from people that are against porn about, physiological changes in the brain, stuff like that. I mean, if you study up on it, you find, no, that's probably not the case. Psychology does not recognize porn addiction and stuff like that. But the problem I have with the whole issue of pornography is you're taking something that is intimate, that is the basis of our survival as a species, that being reproduction, and you make it into a commodity. It is nothing more than something to attract people, to pay, to watch people engaging in sex. Okay? You cheapen it that way. The ancients did not do that. They revered it. And while some of the ancient traditions may have, if we look at them through the eyes of 21st century people, we might think, well, that looks kind of pornographic, maybe some of their rituals. The thing was that they looked upon it as a spiritual thing. And maybe we need to do that. The ancient Hebrews did not look upon sexuality as being a really horrible thing, like original sin, that sort of thing. They looked upon it as being something that should be controlled because it was a life force. You didn't just go out there and do it with everyone. It was part of God's creative process. So therefore it was honored and revered as part of a spirituality. In fact, the Song of Solomon is highly revered by Jews. Most Christians would, they kind of read through that kind of like, ooh, this is kind of naughty. but it's in the Bible. But the thing is that it's looked down upon to a certain degree. And some people say, well, it's not really scriptural. Well, neither is the book of Esther if you're talking about God's intervention being necessary for something to be spiritual. And neither, I guess, much of Psalms and Proverbs and stuff like that would not fit under those categories. But still, it's there, and it symbolizes the way that Jews looked upon sexuality. Now, in our society today, we need people getting married. We have a marriage rates are at a lower point than they ever have been. We have a birth rate that's at lower point than it ever has been. And our birth rate's higher in America than it is in Europe. And the thing is, we need to reaffirm the importance of sex being connected to reproduction. Doesn't mean it has to be all reproduction, but it is a foundational part, okay? You don't just eat bread and a chunk of meat and some water or something for every meal, even though that would probably keep you going. Humans need something deeper than that. And the thing is that we can't just look at sex as being recreation. It has to also be connected to this life-affirming aspect of humanness. And otherwise we do wind up not having kids and, perishing, being replaced by some people that have a better attitude towards it, or at least one that's more pro-natal. So I would say that it's not just a false dichotomy. You're either with the pagans and you're some sort of, everything is sexuality, or you're with American society and it's all, it's all like a commodity. I think you can have something totally different, and that is actually something much more akin to traditional family values, and seeing it as a very important power, something that should be revered. And when someone finds out they're pregnant, they shouldn't, we have to get past this whole, like, it's almost like you've just announced you've got a venereal disease or you've got cancer or something like that, which seems to exist within much of the population today subconsciously, like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant, or you're pregnant, or these kinds of things. It should be something that it's congratulatory, like, yay, and it doesn't matter whether you have 2, 3, 4 kids already. It should still be a yay. This is a blessed event versus, oh, wow, what am I going to do, or what are you going to do? Because a successful society is one that continues itself generation after generation, and one that the ultimate in being not successful is to die out biologically. Okay? So keep that in mind sometime when you're thinking about these issues. Anyway, we're out of time now. So thanks for listening, and I hope you'll tune in next week for another episode of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions.
skateboard, and you